Tonight on Primetime Politics, halting production.
Canadians are tired of talk. They want their job.
We will make sure that we fight for these jobs.
Canadian workers and the Carney government suffer another blow as GM halts production at its EV assembly plant in Ingersoll, Ontario. Coming up, we'll speak to the town's mayor about the impact that decision will have on his community. And we'll speak to Labour leader Lana Payne about the future of Canada's auto industry. Plus,
it's now up to the public service and parliamentarians to act on that.
The Auditor General raises an alarm about cybersecurity. We'll hear her concerns about Ottawa's vulnerabilities. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Canada's auto industry was delivered another blow today, with GM announcing it would halt production of its BrightDrop EV in Ingersoll, Ontario. Now, when it was first announced 4 years ago, the BrightDrop assembly plant was celebrated, a public investment of $1 billion that would create this country's first full-scale EV manufacturing facility. But there were no happy words shared today as news of the production halt comes just a week after Stellantis announced it was moving production of the Jeep Compass from Brampton, Ontario in favor of a facility in Illinois. Take a listen now to some of the political reaction we heard to all of that today in Ottawa.
I met this morning with the Canadian CEO of GM. I was in conversation with the head of the labor union of Unifor, and I also talked to Doug Ford, and I talked to Vic Fideli. And you know what? We're putting in place a response group. We will make sure that we fight for these jobs.
She talked to this person, and she talked to that person, and she talked to this other person, and she talked, and she talked, and they talk, and they talk, and nothing gets done, Mr. Speaker. Canadians are tired of talk. They want their job.
Now, as we said, the Cami plant where GM had been assembling the BrightDrop is located in Ingersoll, Ontario, and we're now joined by the town's mayor, Brian Petrie. Mayor Petrie, thank you for making the time.
Thank you for having me.
Listen, I want to begin with your measure of the kind of blow this is for not only for your town, but for the greater community. 1,200 jobs lost, but there's always a ripple effect. Have you been able to calculate what kind of economic impact this will have on your community?
Staff are hard to work on that, as they always are. We have excellent staff. You know, this is just devastating news, and certainly is something that we weren't expecting. It has been a long road of you know, not good news announcements, but certainly this was not the what we were hoping for, and it's certainly a worst case scenario. So certainly of those 1,200 employees, about 10% of them do live in the community of Ingersoll, but you know, Ingersoll's a driving distance of 2.2 million people within an hour. So we know that this is going to have a lot of effects on other communities. And the broader region in North America. A lot of those parts come from all over the place to build those vehicles.
As I said, a ripple effect. And here we are, because not that long ago, there was some real excitement with EV investments being made in your community, but we now have the Trump administration killing the U.S. EV mandate, applying tariffs on the Canadian auto industry. Here at home, we have the Carney government suspending EV mandates for 2026 at least. Is the dream of an EV future for Ingersoll over?
I don't know what the future of Ingersoll's production is, but I am hopeful that that production will continue. If there's any bright moment out of the announcement that came today, is that the plant is not closing. It is the ceasing production on that vehicle, which, to be honest, the numbers speak for themselves. It has not sold well. But you know, our workforce that we have here, the know-how and the knowledge that they've built up is very valuable, and we know that there will be EVs in the future. People want them, they use them, and we're prepared to be a part of that or any other production that GM wants to bring here.
Now, in the interim, we know that packages will be negotiated with union members, but what does Ingersoll and the greater area, what does it actually need right now from Ottawa and from Queen's Park?
Well, you know, we had the Prime Minister and Premier here in 2022. I welcome them back. You know, it's good to be here in the good times, but we need them in the bad times. This is 12% of our total tax base. It's our major employer, and we need that assistance now. We need them at the table and figuring out what we can do in the near and long term to make sure that these people are taken care of. Number one, we need the employees taken care of, and two, we need to make sure that the rest of people in Ingersoll and the region are taken care of as well, and then the larger sector.
And so what does that translate into? Some type of industrial policy for the region?
Well, I think that we bat above our average in Ingersoll. We have the highest per capita of industrial development anywhere in Canada. And so we are doing our part. We're there to be there in the good and bad times, but in the bad times, we're going to need some assistance. This is a huge blow to our community, and it's not just the tax base. Every grocery store around here is going to feel it. The coffee shops, and it's gonna, like you said, ripple out into the other communities along the way. Assembly plants are the pinnacle of the automotive supply chain, but there are so many other parts manufacturers along the way that have to make everything that they do, and this is going to affect them as well. And so it's I can't stress how terrible thing this is.
Mayor Brian Petrie, we're thinking of you and your community. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Well, let's bring Lana Payne into the conversation now. She's the president of Unifor, the union that represents workers at the CAMI assembly plant in Ingersoll. Lana, thank you for being here. Sorry it's not under happier times.
Yeah, it's been one hit after another for auto workers, for forestry workers, and I honestly feel like this union has been holding back the floodgates for many, many months now, and now all of a sudden the floodgates have burst, and working people are feeling the impact in a very real way of this trade war in this moment.
Yeah, the impact, as you say, and in fact, you and Unifor, you've now issued a statement in response to today's announcement from GM, and in the statement you say, Canada must respond with a real industrial strategy that defends Canadian jobs, leverages our market, and pushes back on Trump's economic bullying. When you say that, Lana, what exactly are you looking for here?
Well, I mean, the reality is that the Canadian marketplace is very important to the things that the U.S. builds. We buy more cars from the U.S. than any other nation on the planet. This is not a one-size equation in that, all the leverage is on Trump's side. We have leverage too. And what I'm saying, and what I've been saying for a very long time now, is that Canada has to be willing to use that leverage to defend our industrial economy, because that industrial economy, including the auto industry right now, is at risk, and we need our government to come to its defense.
Mm-hmm. Now, you did speak with the industry minister today. I'm sure you shared that sentiment with Melanie Joly. What kind of response did you get?
Actually, honestly, since last week, Minister Joly has been doing what I would say an outstanding job in terms of pushing back against these corporations. She wrote a letter to Stellantis. We met with her and Stellantis and the province yesterday around the Brampton decision last week. I spoke to her this morning about what we expect from General Motors and how we need to collectively work together to keep the auto footprint in Canada, keep production in Canada, keep these jobs in Canada as we work our way through this trade war. And she is, from my understanding, setting up response teams, emergency response teams around these two decisions. But the reality is that there are going to be more decisions like this, because these companies have been feeling the pressure from Donald Trump. And the only way that we protect Canadian production is to make sure that they feel pressure from us too. And that may mean that we have to look at the tariff remission plans that these auto companies have received and use that as leverage to make sure that they're putting product and keeping and living up to their commitments to Canadian workers. We've got to fight and play hardball, Michael, because the reality is we're in an economic war right now, and everything is at risk.
Obviously, I'm not in the rooms where these discussions are taking place, but based on what I've been seeing, Lana, though, right now Canada is negotiating on other matters, steel, aluminum, energy. They are expecting a deal with that within weeks. Is this a case where the government is choosing to try to solve what it can right now and then get back to autos? And if that is the case, what's your response to that?
I have been very concerned that we leave things like auto and lumber and other sectors that, by the way, are going to be under attack from the United States because there are any number of other trade investigations happening as you and I speak, and that we run out of leverage and are not willing to use other leverage to make sure that we're protecting the auto industry. We cannot be in a place where the United States gets all the things that they need to build up their economy, to make sure that they can build the things that we need, and you know, they're getting all of our resources from us, and we are left with an inability to build things in Canada because we don't have a market for them. There has to be a trade-off here, that if they want critical resources from Canada, that we get something in return for that, and if we can't, then that's a different game, and that means that we've got to use the leverage that those resources give us to put pressure on the United States.
And when you say leverage, like an export tax on those resources?
All of the things, you know, looking at who can own things in this country, looking at export taxes, looking at all of the things that we know that would create and hasten an economic problem for the United States. At some point, we have to say that the 150,000 jobs in the auto industry, direct and in the supply chain, are worth keeping. The spin-off jobs, which totaling up, you know, we're at 500,000 jobs, another 300,000 to 400,000 in the forest sector. These jobs are worth defending. These communities are worth defending. They are middle-class jobs. They are good union jobs, and we have to fight for them with everything we have.
I'm wondering if this can be done by the Canadian public, not just the government, because I'm thinking about when GM was essentially threatening to shut down Oshawa a few years back. The workers fought back and sent a message to Canadians, do not buy GM, and the company responded to that message. Is that something that you're willing to consider or are considering right now?
I mean, I've said this exact thing, Michael, to the automakers, that they are risking, you know, they're in the business of brands. They are risking turning Canadians off their products right now by shifting jobs out of Canada and moving them to the United States. And this is something that they should be extremely concerned about. And a little goodwill here will go a long way. And standing up and saying that we believe in our Canadian footprint, we believe in our Canadian workforce, and we're going to keep jobs there would be very, very significant right now. The alternative is Canadians are doing it already. They are using their spending power, their consumer power to push back in organic ways, and these companies risk Canadians retaliating against them.
Now, it looks like, and I know this is not music to your ears, but it looks like that there will be no deal on autos until CUSMA is reopened, perhaps renegotiated. So what do auto workers need between now and whenever those talks may happen? Yes, you're talking about action, but is there something to be done in terms of worker support right now?
I don't accept that. I don't accept that we're in a place where we can't get a deal until we get to a CUSMA table. What do we know what that table is going to look like, Michael? Do we know that the President of the United States is even going to want to renew that deal? He can cancel it at any time. Leaving the auto industry into that kind of precarious or risky situation is, I would say, unacceptable. We have to make sure that we are bargaining and negotiating a deal that supports all of our industries in Canada collectively, a proper Team Canada approach. We cannot fall into this trap of having Trump pit sector against sector, region against region, and worker against worker. That is not a solution where Canada can win.
I hear the urgency in your voice, Lana, and we're quickly running out of time, but I'm wondering if that urgency is shared by the government and by the people you speak with involved in these discussions.
Well, I hope it is. I can only keep doing what I'm doing here, Michael, but I will tell you, workers are very frustrated right now, and they're going to start showing those frustrations in any number of ways. And we will have no choice as a union to also lay it on the line. People are in the fight of their lives right now, and that means, you know, we're going to have to lay it on the line, and I've been very clear about what that looks like.
Lana Payne, thank you for this. I really appreciate the time this evening.
Thanks, Michael.
Well, on to another matter now, as Canada's Auditor General filed 6 new reports today, each one taking the government to task for shortcomings on delivery and failing to live up to promises and standards. Now, among those reports, one on the Canada Revenue Agency, another on cybersecurity, and gaps when it comes to that security that could make Ottawa vulnerable.
Slow coordination and limited information sharing during a recent major attack delayed the government's response, extending the time during which the attacker had access to public servants' personal information.
Well, with more on the reports issued today, we're now joined by the Auditor General of Canada, Karen Hogan. Karen, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So you have 6 reports today, one extra than usual. Usually it's 5, but I really want to focus in on 2 of those reports. First on cybersecurity, then CRA. And beginning with cybersecurity, you note that between 2023 and 2024, the federal government, its agencies, its ministries were subjected to trillions of cyber attacks. But you also say government response has been insufficient, in part because the systems that exist are not being used in part or at all.
Mm-hmm. So there are some really good cyber defense tools that are being offered by Shared Services Canada and Communication Security Establishment Canada. One of them would be these cyber defense sensors. And right now, policy is such that not every federal organization needs to use those. So while they are solid and known around the world as being effective, it's not a requirement. So we saw that about 119 out of the 204 federal organizations that aren't required to use them, but some are opting in. And so when you only have this sort of fragmented approach to cyber defenses, it really leaves some vulnerabilities and gaps. And that's why we highlighted that the tools are effective, but there's some gaps that really need to be closed.
Okay, so into that, you talk about the cybersecurity rather not following through with cybersecurity could lead to some significant damages, things like theft of personal or sensitive information, denial of access to services, financial loss. How exposed is Ottawa? If not everyone is using what is available to them, just how exposed is the federal government?
I think it's important to take a step back and say every department and agency and Crown Corporation is required to have their own cyber defenses. These cyber tools that we looked on are an extra layer over and above that. So there are defenses everywhere, but this would just bolster the sort of federal landscape. Think about it when you're at work and your IT department asks you to report any phishing emails that you might have, because the more things are reported, the more you can enhance your cyber defenses, and that's what's missing here, is not everyone in the federal family is partaking in tools that could just enhance and bolster defenses.
So the recommendation is that everybody adopt these tools?
Well, it is a policy choice, so I can't recommend that the policy be changed, but I thought it was important to highlight sort of the gaps and the unintended consequences, because I think every Canadian would expect that the federal government is going to do everything it possibly can to protect their information as well as government information.
Yeah, and underline the fact, what struck me was when you said trillions of attacks, not millions, not billions, but trillions, which I'm assuming is both minor and major, but still concerning when you think about the sheer number.
Yeah, those could be as simple as someone just sort of monitoring activity on your website to an actual possible attack. So there's all varying degrees of attacks, and these defenses are helping to block some of those. But attacks are becoming so much more sophisticated and increasing in number, and that's why I think every federal organization needs to think of every tool they can possibly use to have good cyber defense.
Okay, so that is cybersecurity. The other one I want to touch has to do with the Canada Revenue Agency, the CRA, because in your report you say that in fiscal year ending March 2024, only 18% of calls from Canadians to the CRA got a timely response, and only 17% of general individual tax questions were accurate. Are you shocked by that number?
Well, considering we audited service quality and timeliness back in 2017, I would have expected to see some improvements. And while there have been improvements, wait times are really just too long. The service standard was changed to answering within 15 minutes, but callers are waiting on average 31 minutes, and some wait over an hour. And I'm sure that there are others who wait even longer. And I think after waiting that long, you really want to get an accurate response. And so what we saw is a difference there between if it was just a general tax question, that's where in 17% of the cases the answers were accurate. But when the question was more unique about your own personal situation and your own account, the accuracy rate was so much higher.
Yeah, okay, and with still 17%, that's an abject failure if you were to be a student in class. So what's behind this poor performance?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that contribute to it, and we only probably touched a few of them. We saw that agents' performance evaluations were only considering the accuracy and completeness of responses to a small degree. So less than 10% of their annual evaluation was about accuracy. The rest was on adherence to schedule or call volumes. So that doesn't really create a culture where you're favoring accuracy. We also saw that some of the tools were not as effective as they could be to help agents in getting accurate, timely responses to individuals. So it isn't just about the number of agents, but about the tools that agents have.
Okay, now last month, the finance minister did launch a 100-day plan to try to address some of the shortcomings that your report has addressed and once again addresses this year. What do you make of that effort? Do you think it will actually improve performance?
So that 100-day plan was launched actually after the end of our audit period, so I didn't really delve into it a lot. I have looked at it, and I think that the steps in that 100-day plan, coupled with the responses to our recommendations, should see some improvement. But I can just imagine the frustration of taxpayers when the onus is on you to file your tax return on time with accurate information. That you would expect to call the CRA and reach an agent in a timely way, but more importantly, to be given accurate and complete responses to your tax questions.
Okay, well, I think a lot of Canadians are at home listening to this, nodding their head yes. Karen, thank you for this. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Now, as I said, the CRA and cybersecurity are only 2 of the 6 reports issued today. In addition to those, a report was also tabled on First Nations programs in which Indigenous Services Canada was told it was making unsatisfactory progress on safe drinking water, emergency services, and health. Another report on childcare in which the AG gave a mixed review of the government's performance, saying Ottawa has been able to make childcare more affordable, but may not be able to meet its 2026 target for childcare spaces. And finally, 2 other reports, both on the military, the first concluding that the recruitment process for new servicemen and women is taking too long, and the second on housing, which concluded National Defence does not have enough residential units to house their military personnel. Well, for his thoughts on the recommendations being made by the AG, we're now joined by retired General Tom Lawson. From 2012 to 2015, he served as Canada's Chief of Defence Staff. General Lawson, good to see you again. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure, Michael.
Listen, I want to begin with recruitment because in his response to the AG report, the Defence Minister says that in the period from April 2024 to March 2025, Canadian Armed Forces actually surpassed its recruitment goals by about 200 new recruits. I'm wondering, are you encouraged by that number, or are you still concerned about the shortage of recruits in the years that preceded the last fiscal?
No, certainly encouraged by those numbers. Unfortunately, we built quite a deficit, a shortage of about 6,000 regulars and 6,000 reservists. But this is the first year in the last few since COVID where we're going to grow the numbers of people in uniform instead of getting smaller.
Yeah, grow, as you say, the expectation. The Auditor General does, though, raise a concern about staffing levels, stating that as of June 30, 2024, 13% of occupations in the Canadian Armed Forces were at risk of not reaching authorized staffing levels. Now, this includes signal and line technicians, combat engineers, pilots. You know, operationally, what impact would that have if staffing levels fall below authorized expectations?
Well, they have been below authorized expectations for quite some number of years now, and the effect is very harsh. A lot of responsibilities fall to those other people who have remained in uniform, and it doubles up their duties. You know, with people come hope, and with a shortage of people becomes a lot more despair. But I think that we're kind of on the right track now. Everybody, all of our partners in NATO and friendly nations around the world got kicked during COVID, with the pandemic shutting down all the schoolhouses, all of the training facilities, and so everybody got shorter. You know, we lost all of those people who were leaving at the end of their terms, retiring, but nobody was coming in because there was nowhere to train them. So that's how we fell into this this huge debt, and now we have to dig our way out. And there are some positive steps being taken both by the military and by the government to address these things.
And when you say positive steps, what do you look to?
Well, first, the military has been seized with this for years. If I were in uniform right now reading the Auditor General's report, I'd say, tell me something I don't know. But the fact is, it's always a good thing when the Auditor General brings heat and light to something as important as this. And the military has been doing some really creative things, like allowing landed immigrants to speed up their path to citizenship by joining the forces, and extended probationary periods that allow people to start their training even though their security clearances aren't complete. Things like that, and portals online so people have a lot of control over medical appointments and interview appointments, things that weren't in place even 10 years ago. And on top of that, the government just put a lot of focus on compensations and benefits, and those raises are going to come to bear with more people being interested in making this a career, I think.
And to that, you know, the Carney government did increase salaries, 20% increase alone for privates in the regular force. But there still remains a question about housing, General. Questions about how well D&D understands the challenge, the targets to get housing built, because they still fall short of what's actually needed. How important is that line item for recruitment and retention?
Well, I'd say 10 or 15 years ago, it wasn't that important. And the reason I smile is because the armed forces well understand that housing for the last 5 to 10 years has been really, really important because of the price of housing in Canada. Back 15 or 20 years ago, we were moving as a military in a different direction, where you were encouraged to move onto the economy, to buy a home and start building some equity. 40 or 50 years ago, everyone was in married quarters or barracks if you were single. And we started to move away from that. And I think there was a lot of support for that. And I think the rationale was strong. But then when housing markets in many of the places where our bases are situated started going crazy, it became very difficult to look after your own housing on salaries provided by the military. Now, we have some models from good friends like the Americans or the Australians, in which what they do is they provide a very generous housing allowance. So if you move from somewhere that's not too expensive to somewhere that's far more expensive, like Toronto or Victoria, you get a very generous housing allowance. That's where the Department of National Defence fell down. So we're kind of moving back to where we were 40 or 50 years ago, and there's discussion that we need about 7,000 more houses built for people in uniform. And now, with a lot more money being invested in the military, I think what's going to happen is the Canadian Forces Housing Authority are going to get up on their high horse and accelerate this whole construction process. So
that said, General, and I quickly running out of time, but I want to ask, what do you hope the Minister and D&D take away from this AG report?
Well, you know, you read the minister's response today, and it's very positive. What he says is to the Auditor General, thank you very much for highlighting these things, and we agree with you. I think what he's saying is that we in the ministry, as politicians, and the Department of National Defence, Canadian Armed Forces, are all seized with these things. And the Auditor General does say that, look, we're understanding that you've taken a bunch of steps, especially on recruiting, that we simply did not have time to look at. So those things have not come to bear. And I think the Auditor General and her team is probably going to have a follow-up look at this in a year or two. And I think what they're going to find is some of these things have eased a little bit. But as the Chief of Defense says, to fulfill that or to fill up that debt of personnel, it's going to take till at least 2030. And that's a very important thing for Canadians to know.
Well, we keep our eye on that prize. General Tom Lawson, always appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, Michael. Thank you.
And that is our program for this Tuesday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow evening. Until then, take care.